Right, okay, I'll make it 6:30. We'll make a start. So this evening's webinar is on the high press. Okay, there'll be some videos that we'll share with you throughout, and you'll be able to see them. Okay, and we'll share the PDF of the PowerPoint at the end. Okay, so you've got that as a resource to look through. Any issues as you go through, I'll be here to help. Okay, so Matthew Ramsworth, who's an analyst at FA. Okay, so I'll pass over.
Evening, everybody. Nice to see some familiar names on the list as it's coming through. Delighted to introduce Matthew Blinkhorn.
Evening, everyone.
Really delighted to have him here. So Matt's head of coaching at Fleetwood Town, ex-professional, over 400 league games, playing for Blackpool, Luton, Bury, Morecambe, Sligo Rovers. Not missed any of the links, have I?
AFC Fylde.
AFC Fylde as well. Very good. So, vast amount of experience, centre forward. So delighted to have you here, Blinks, and hopefully the conversations we can have and the discussions we can provide a bit of thought around what is a high press. Obviously, there's options to try and send through questions. So when we show some content, the more questions we can maybe get from yourselves, the easier the kind of evening kind of goes. So we can be a bit interactive and we can start to really kind of talk football and start to generate some kind of thought and discussion. What would be nice for me to kind of do now is kind of hand over to Matt to try and get to give us a bit of an intro really to who he is and what he's doing at the moment around Fleetwood.
Yeah. So hello everyone again. My sort of coaching journey started at the age of 26, 27 when I realised that my professional career wasn't going to go where I wanted it to go, which was obviously the top level in the Premier League and earn multi-millions of pounds. So I started to dip into part-time coaching at Blackpool with the foundation phase. I was working with the under-9s at the time. I was totally new to coaching young kids. Didn't really know where I was going to go with it. I remember my first actual coaching session, I came back with a migraine because I was trying to get too much out of that one session with a load of 8-year-olds. So my journey's been the last 8-9 years, and I've learned a lot in that time. So I've worked with 9s to 12s foundation phase at Blackpool, and then I moved on to the foundation phase lead for a couple of years. Then went to YD lead at Blackpool for a couple of years, and then came across to Fleetwood. It was an opportunity to come across and be with a club that was really forward thinking and looking to develop their young players, a new academy. So I saw it was a good opportunity for me to progress my career and hopefully help Fleetwood progress as well. Did the YD lead here for a year, and then I've been in the head of coaching role now for 10 months.
No, fantastic. As part of my role as a FA youth coach developer, my job is to go in and support Blinks around his programme about helping the coaches help the players. I've been at the FA now for 4 years, coach now in the professional game for I think it's about 23, worked at various levels of the youth game in various roles, working from foundation phase all the way through to under 18s, academy manager, heads of coaching, phase lead, so a bit of experience around the youth game. Also a few years as a first team coach in League 2. So hopefully we can try and generate some discussion, some thought, and I think it was a very humble kind of introduction from Matt. But you're not just an analyst; you're actually a coach as well, aren't you? So
yes.
Hopefully between the three of us, we can try and provide some insight into what the high press is. We're actually on the UEFA A at the moment, and we've been 2 days into this kind of theme. So hopefully some of the content will be thought provoking. But if you've got any questions, that'd be really useful to try and help us along our way.
Cool. So I'm going to kick it off with a question back to you. So this should come on your screen right now. So there's a little poll. Which phase do you currently work in? Okay, there's 82 of you in the room. So let's kick it off. So you can select multiple answers for this if you do work across the phase, as Matt's done this time.
So the moment we've got one, we've got two replies.
Yeah,
here we go.
We've woke up. Just gives an idea of what the room looks like, what we're looking at.
It's a good spread, actually. It's good.
So as we predict, obviously the YD phase normally has the most because most age groups within it. yeah, there seems to be a nice spread across the rest. So we're just going to kick it off really with our aims for the night. So we're going to start looking at what the top teams do, okay, and how the high price looks like for them leading teams. We'll try and bring it into what it looks like for England and on camp, what our England teams go after, and then take it into how you go about linking in our principles within practice design. Anything like to add to that?
No, very good. I think we'll just get straight into it.
Okay, so we'll start with a principle of play video, okay, so which will hopefully link in some of the things we'll go after across this webinar tonight.
Okay, great. So hopefully you found that insightful and thought-provoking. The kind of way we kind of classify a high press, certainly within our courses, to try and help learners make sense of what it is that we term it as being out of possession in the attacking third. It's the first phase of defence. So we had Jimmy Gilligan present on the air licence this morning around position specific, and he used a great quote from Michael Owen around Ian Rush. Ian Rush being the best defender he's known about it, starting high up the pitch and trying to get the ball back as close to the opposition's goal as he can. So that was very interesting this morning for a group of learners. Preventing the opposition from building the attack and winning the ball high up the pitch. So that's how we kind of frame it. That's how we kind of measure where we've got success. And also it gives us a bit of a frame of reference to along how we kind of look to design our practice, which we'll come to later. So before we go to a question to try and think about what it looks like in your environment, what would be really kind of interesting for me, for one, is to try and find out about a bit of the program around Fleetwood. So, what it looks like maybe the foundation phase all the way kind of through to certainly the 23s and first team, and how you maybe start to introduce this to the players and how that maybe changes as you start going through the pathway.
I think sort of certainly in the foundation phase, what we're looking for is dominating our 1v1s, both attacking and defensively. When I first came in, there was a technical director in that just wanted everyone to go and press the ball wherever you were on the pitch, go and press the ball and have high intensity press with that. We still have that in the foundation phase, but for me, you look at the technical and tactical side of it in the side of it in the foundation phase. But first, you have to have an appetite to want to go and win the ball back. So it's a psychological thing first. So we just want them to go and try and win the ball back and try and dominate the ball. And behind that is the why did he do it? So the young kids in the foundation phase want to know, well, why am I doing this? And the simple answer is because the closer you are to the goal when you win the ball back, more chance you got of scoring. So that's what we try and link in with our foundation phase, is just go and try and press the ball and win the ball back as high as you possibly can. To start touching on the tactical detail, sort of in the 13s, 14s, on the decisions of when to go, and obviously looking at triggers, and obviously if one person goes, can the other player backing up and covering support, and keeping obviously the lines nice and compact. And then we play 4-4-2 with the 9s to 16s. The under 18s play 4-3-3, and obviously the first 23s play the same as well. First team change depending on the opposition that they're playing against. They like to play 3-4-3 at the minute, or 3-5-2. But in terms of sort of the pressing style of the game, at the top end, it'll dictate who they're playing against and what they feel their strengths and weaknesses are.
No, brilliant. And it's really kind of interesting when I first came to the club around the philosophy of pressing, because it did look extreme, certainly from the younger age group. So there's a great clip on YouTube with a total football from the Dutch national team in 1974. So Reiners Michel, and if you have a look, if you get a chance, it is that kind of way that the ball's there, everyone goes to try and smother it, to try and win it back and try and cause that chaos and confusion. And I think that's still evident to see. So when you start talking about, well, it is something we try and encourage, it's certainly something you can identify when you come and watch the practices. And as you start to go through the pathway, you can start to see more decision making attached with their actions. So there's certainly a real clear kind of layer of detail and layer of kind of realism as you start to go through, which is really interesting. Just to pick up on a kind of really thought-provoking point is 4-4-2, younger ones. What's your thoughts?
4-4-2 sort of for the under 9s would be 2-3-1.
Okay.
And then we'd thought that as the 9v9 level would be 2-4-2. We see it as, because we want to try and create as many 1v1s all over the pitch. We feel doing that, sort of certainly the 2-4-2 formation, is if our position play 2 up front, then we've got our 1v1s or 2v2 at the back, and we want our players to try and dominate that and how they can sort of solve the problems in wide areas. So central defenders will have to defend in wide areas. If you play 2-4-2, the ball will be slid down the side, so we can obviously try and get our players to defend that way.
Brilliant. I think
there's some good comments coming in about the first action not having to win the ball. Okay, so actually we're going to talk about it later in terms of setting traps and how that knock-on effect of that intention to go and to press high and win the ball up there. It doesn't have to happen from that first action.
Yeah, I think when you get so it's making that distinguished kind of insight around, is it pressing or is it defending? So if it's pressing with the intent not to initially win the ball back, so if we can win it, we go and win it. But if we go and set the press right, it might not be me who wins the ball. It might be the second, third, or fourth press. So if we're defending to try and accelerate, decelerate, force one way, then that's probably, yeah, it is pressing, but it's probably more defending. And having real strategy in your mind around who the danger is and where I want the opposition to maybe have the ball to set the trap. So that's something we maybe talk about in greater detail as we go forwards. But I certainly, is the foundation phase, just trying to get them to understand about actually making an action. Cool. So I suppose that's the kind of key message, which I'd maybe encourage you to spend 4 or 5 minutes on, just to think what it looks like in your environment and the considerations what you've got taking place around some of the questions you're obviously generating now around, if you're a foundation phase coach, what ages that I'm working with. So if I'm working with, say, the under 11s, how does that maybe look? So it's 9v9, they've had 2 years experience already in the academy or within the grassroots team. So information what's come prior, but also what's to come ahead. So maybe just 3 or 4 minutes just self-reflecting, maybe making some questions or making some thoughts we can relay back to after the presentation around your key considerations and what it means to you. And I think that's really important as we go through the course of the evening, is always relating it back. What's the impact of the information we're discussing and talking around, and how's it going to help you with your players in your environment?
Sorry, you've not lost sound. We were just letting you have some thinking time. We've got another poll just to share. We think it would be interesting just to get some differences. So whether you work in the male or female game, so I'll share that with you now.
Some great questions and some great thoughts coming through. What's really interesting is the triggers to press. So just keep considering when we start to show some footage, or maybe revisit it at the end, and identify when the press takes place. So, for example, it might be a bad pass, etc., without telling you too many things. So, what are the triggers around when the press takes place, and when do you start to introduce this to your players so they can start recognising them moments within the game?
Okay, so just in answer to that question, it's an 80-20 split in terms of male, female.
Great. And it's just understanding it as we go through the presentation around, again, what it means to you in your environment with your players and what physical considerations you need to maybe have, dependent on whether you work in the male game, female game, senior game or youth, because high pressing requires a lot of physical output. And it's, Andy's just come up with a statement about game intelligence. It certainly is intelligence of your players making the right decision to the action, because we can't press for prolonged periods of time. So that'd be something we can certainly revisit and start to unpick as we progress through the evening.
Yeah, I guess a good consideration is the fascination with playing out from the back. So actually the reverse of it to high press against it seems to be quite a successful strategy in terms of youth football and how that trade-off's going.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So we've got a team who likes to really build from the back, and we've got to be really mindful of the capabilities of the players versus the players. So if we've got a really outstanding team at building the attack, and we go on high press and we don't set the traps right, we don't recognise the time to go and press, then we might leave ourselves exposed and we might leave gaps. There's a message come through from Jeff around the lows of the game, and we'll certainly address that one as we start moving through. Certainly around the notion initially of stopping the opposition starting. Now that teams can obviously sink down into the box, that changes decision making and the space available to what you're affording on the pitch now. So we'll certainly explore that a bit further as we start to get into some of the footage.
Right, so we'll just take it on. So throughout the night, we're going to link in our principles of play, which press is one of them. So one of the main ones, and how we link in then the other sub-components within that. Okay, so we're just going to take a look at who are the top team at the minute. Okay, so we're going to take some data from the Premier League this season. I'm just going to explain the axes. So along the side, we've got passes per defensive action, okay, which is the number of passes that the opposition have before the team in question do a defensive action, okay, which is a clearance, an interception, a tackle, a block shot. So any defensive action that the team do, how many passes do they allow before that? Okay, so we say teams with a low number show real high intent because the opposition have few passes and they're right on. Okay, so if we're letting a team have 20 passes, then we say they just sink in and sit in that block, for instance. Okay, along the bottom, we've got ball recoveries within the attacking half. So we're really trying to half the pitch, who win it high up the pitch. Okay, so we've got an axis from left to right, and we'd say teams that have a high number have got a really effective press because they consistently win the ball high up the pitch. Okay, so this is per game numbers for the Premier League this season. Okay, so there's the teams, the little dots. Who would we predict is a high performing team? So who's really successful at high pressing? It's where we start to see who breaks it first. Who's the brave one?
What's it? 16% of those. Older than that. Yeah.
Man City, Liverpool. Struggling. Leicester. I'm just going to name alternatives. Okay, so yeah, they'd be sound guesses. So I'm going to start to populate the graph. So you have got the top three. Okay, so Liverpool City. Okay, some interesting ones. Southampton this season starting to, obviously with Hassan Hutel in charge, start to take that Leipzig mentality of pressing really high. Okay, Everton's shifted in there, and Brighton this season changing their style of play under Graham Potter, shifting into the top right quadrant, which is above average on both metrics. Okay, interesting. Leicester fall inside the other graph, so they actually don't recover the ball high up the pitch as often as the teams in the top right quadrant, but they actually have the highest PPDA, so actually they show the most intent, so they've got the lowest number, and it's just under 7 per game. So
PPDA, just to be clear.
Yeah, so how many passes you allow the opposition to have before you have a defensive action. So in this case, Leicester allow the opposition to have 7 passes before they go and press them and do a defensive action. And that's taken within the top half of the pitch. Okay, so the numbers work off each other. Okay, and they're the best in the Premier League at that. And then you've got other teams which may be quite active within the attacking half, but maybe do it from deeper. So they're more in sort of that high press to mid block. So rather than go at it high, they let the team have a few more passes and then winning. Okay, so you've got Watford, Burnley, and Sheffield United in that. And then you've got the rest, with Newcastle holding up everyone else. Okay, so they allow nearly 18 passes before they do a defensive action on average, and they have the lowest number of ball recoveries, so under 10 per game. Okay, so you would typically say they're there in a mid to low block, so they let teams come onto them, and obviously they've got a profile of players they can go and counter attack really quickly. So that will sort of support that. So as you've seen, some of the comments are coming in. It's interesting to see how the knock-on effect. So that's the next layer, isn't it? Actually, what does the result? So how many get a shot within that? I'm glad you've asked that question because so did we. So Liverpool stand out for me, and they also stand out in terms of their efficiency when they get it. Okay, so 15% of their ball recoveries in the attacking half lead to a shot. Okay, so which is the 4th best in the Premier League. So that for me is a real standout in terms of they're really consistent at winning the ball high up the pitch, and then when they get it, they do something with it. And they've actually scored 8 goals in the Premier League this season from recoveries within the attacking half.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So Guy Parkins put a really good question on there about the physical capabilities and having to really work hard and how to make. Can we just scroll down to the question because it's good off the screen? So always interested to see these teams being able to maintain the high press across the season due to physical demand. Some teams always struggle to maintain this. If you look at the best teams are doing it, I think it coincides with probably the best teams who can actually keep the ball as well. So we can't maintain a high press for long periods of time, certainly over what is a really hectic and long season. So being able to retain the ball and actually rest whilst in possession is really key. The probably effectiveness as well from the press and will probably have an effect on how the opposition may be set up against these teams as well. So how they high press might be organising their team in possession, ready for the defensive action. So they've got good organisation in and around the ball with distances. So when they do potentially give the ball away, they're in a good structure to defend. So that might be centre halves locking onto centre forward place to make sure the units are connected, but also allowing the regain of the ball as quick as they can, so they counter press, which will in turn allow them to repeat their actions more often. So they'll exhibit high exertions of energy, but then when they need to have a rest, obviously keep the ball and mechanise to rebuild them stocks before they can go.
That's a good question from the team in terms of like teams that are changing the profile. So Man United was directly asked. Unfortunately enough, I've been collecting this data. So they have shifted up to the top right quadrant because they weren't in there last season. So they are becoming more of a high intensity, want to win it, willingness to go and press sort of team.
I think it's always interesting as well. So when teams do start to consider about changing their style, they've got to be really mindful about how much they do, certainly in training, but also games, because teams just try and change from one style to another style, usually get lots of injuries. So how to train, certainly periodise your kind of working week or season to try and consider these kind of things, really important to try and maintain the fitness and well-being of your squad, especially if you've got a small squad.
Yeah, there's some interesting consideration about Liverpool and Leeds sort of blowing up, so they go really high and then they sort of dip off a little bit, which might be a conditioning element.
That definitely can be a conditioning element through the week. I think obviously Bielsa is huge on the players, position specific, so he's on them all the time. So we're told. So that's huge in making sure the players have the physical capability to be able to do it, but can they do it for an 8-9 month period? And how does the squad change? How does the team change throughout that season? So that's also an interesting point.
I think the message from Jeff there about how do you have an effective high press when transition occurs and the team is out of balance. Obviously, it'll depend on the situation. But certainly the defending whilst in possession theory, which I think that a lot of coaches, certainly in my kind of observations when supporting them, need to look away from the ball more to make sure they are organising when in possession. So if they are 1-on-1 at the back or 2-2, they can start to recognise the delay and deny the space, and maybe we start to squeeze the press from behind and from the front. So how quickly can the midfielders turn, try and put pressure on from the front to try and nick it and try and squeeze the touch. But it's about recognising through the principles of play, can we press? If we can't press, then we've got to try and get some defensive organisation and try and drop and try and get some kind of compact within the team shape.
Okay, so Liverpool's going to be our focus. We're going to ask a few questions. So, one, what does their press look like? If it's successful, how and why? And we're really trying to delve into the detail of how it works. And then if it's not, the same questions. How and why, and what could you do about it? So I'm going to show you some footage. There's 3 clips within it. It will go play fast speed, into slower, and then back again. So you've got a real chance to delve into the detail. We're going to ask these sort of questions. So what's successful, what's unsuccessful, what's the reasons why? Okay, so the games we're going to look at is FA Cup from this season. So Liverpool at home against Everton. Okay, so they're going to make up some of the clips. And we're also going to look at Liverpool versus Man City Community Shield from the start of the season. So 2 top teams going against each other. Okay, I'll just share the footage with you now. Okay, so there's 6 minutes, there's 3 clips. Watch them and start to populate the chat as you've done with your observations. Okay, so great responses coming in, which we've been reading. Sorry, there wasn't sound. We were just giving you some thinking time, and we were trying to pick out the best of the flood of comments coming in.
Yeah, I think that, you know, if we keep the sound on, we start to express our thoughts, and we're maybe giving you solutions to the problems you might start to witness and observe yourself. So really start to think when we put the video footage on about, you know, what you're seeing, why you're seeing it, and, you know, again, relating back to what it means for you when you're working with your players in your environment, whatever format of the game you're working at. So we're just going to run the clips back through again and just start to consider around, you know, what is success. So if we deem maybe building the attack, so playing out from the back is being successful, if we maybe get across the halfway line, maybe high press success, maybe stopping the opposition from doing that. So start to think about, well, how do we do it? So what's the first man doing? So a few of you on the comments have said about the nearest man closing the ball down to put pressure on the ball. And how does the players near and away from the ball assist that person in doing so, and what comes off the back of it? So quite rightly, you've talked around maybe the first person not winning the ball in the press. It might be the second or third, but just start to think about, you know, when Liverpool are playing here, where would they like the ball to go, and how are they maybe doing it or maybe not doing it?
It's a real good point from Mike in terms of the distances from the front line and the back line, and obviously the limitations of broadcast footage not allowing you to see the whole picture, which is, as my honest background, my dream to go. And this is, you need to see how that whole team are working together.
Yeah, and I think when it's a dead ball from the goalkeeper's kick, and, you know, quite rightly identified before on the new laws of the game, it opens up 18 more yards of the pitch. So in the past, through previous laws, where you could only start from outside the 18-yard box, your back line might have been on the halfway line. We're seeing more and more, especially with the likes of Man City playing, that they'll quite happily have the centre halves 10, 15 yards inside the opposition's pitch to try and make sure they can ring the block and actually be in an effective position so they can get the second and third phase of attack. So it's really interesting to see how kind of the rules of the game now is really getting certainly managers and teams to think about different solutions to what problems they might face within the game.
If you just pause it there, when you've obviously they've got through the press, then you're almost in an even numbers game, aren't you? Like you're out of balance at times if you've got 2v1 out wide. If you don't get it right at the top of the pitch, it can lead to situations further on. Yeah,
it's, you know, in a utopia world, your high press works all the time. You win the ball back and you go and attack, but it's the what ifs then, isn't it? So if they break through the high press, then how do we then go and recruit players to try and form a mid block? And unfortunately, if they break that one as well, then, you know, they're into a low block and on towards our goal. So where is it we want them to start thinking about having space? So how do we certainly protect areas of the pitch what we might be vulnerable in? How do we protect the opposition from finding parts of the pitch where they might be strong in? And how, more importantly, how do we get to a point where we start protecting where the goal is? And again, it'll come down to personnel. So each coach on this kind of webinar will have different players and have different ways of playing. But it's really being clear about what it is you want and how best to try and communicate that to your players. Try and make it simple and have clarity so they've got best chance of succeeding.
Because I just want you to keep the focus of what was successful, what's unsuccessful in your mind. I'm going to show you some more footage, which should hopefully bring that to life.
Playing, of course, in the winter. I know it's warm in the daytime, but it is. It's quite odd, I think, when we found even covering the World Cup, Stuart, in Brazil and South Africa, going from the summer in Europe to 5 or 6 weeks in the winter, when the rest of our families are enjoying the summer back home.
Well, it depends what part of Brazil you were in, didn't it, really?
Oh, it was hot, but it was dark. Yeah. The daylight deprivation that the medics tell us is not good for us. That back pass, or that pass, stray pass, not good for Manchester City.
Oh, you covered England in Manaus. That was particularly hot, wasn't it?
Manaus, which is now a derelict stadium, I'm told, or one that's not used for football. There's no football team in Manaus. They spent millions building that. Italy beat England there. In the soaring temperatures, of course, you're right to mention that, but it was warm in the evening as well, but it was dark at 5 o'clock, as opposed to here where it'll be dark at 9 o'clock tonight.
The other extreme was Porto Alegre, which was freezing cold.
It was. As was Johannesburg 4 years earlier. But here's Salah, who's pretty hot in this game.
Useful to obviously note that the time of the game being the first game of the season, Community Shield, some of the comments saying that teams were trying to work each other out, which was probably evident with new rules coming in, new players coming in, and how that then has a knock-on effect with the tactics and strategies that the teams do.
I think I went to that game and it was a really warm day. So to try and play at the intensity and press like both teams wanted to do, in line with the new rules, what were coming out, and the really creative ways that Man City looked to try and play with it against the press was really fascinating. When you consider around the way Liverpool try to press, they try to press with a flat three and also a flat three in midfield as well, so it allows them to maybe occupy more space. I think it's difficult when you play against a team like Man City. What do you try and do? Do you try and stop them from going central when they go out wide and cope with it really well? Or do you stop them from going out wide and they go central? So I suppose it's trying to think about how to try and dominate your 1v1 battles. So being technically excellent at trying to dominate the 1v1 defensively, but also in attack. But also consider where the main threat may be, and also think about how then you can start to win the ball back to then ultimately try and be in a position where you can start to attack the opposition. So if Man City do progress nice and patiently to try and advance up the pitch, but you do win the ball back, how then can you start to think about penetrating the spaces what they afford you?
I think talk about unsuccessful. I think Liverpool are great at, once they've won the ball back, exposing the space. So even though they may not win the ball really high up the pitch, I think if they do win it in the middle part of the pitch, let's say, they've got the players to then really hit on regaining possession. So down the side, Salah loves to get down the sides, Mane loves to come inside. So when they do in that position, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world if they don't win it as high up the pitch as possible, because they have the players to hurt you. If you win it a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I think it's really key as well. So one of the comments were around it'd be great to have footage what you can see from behind the goal. And I think not seeing the full units within the team around the press is really important. So consider the position-specific player profiles around the back four of what Liverpool have. They can go on a really high press because they can manage the spacing behind them. So you think about the pace what Alexander, Gomez, Van Dijk, Robson possess with the positioning around Alisson, managing the space in between the back line and the goal. That's key for the front unit and the midfield unit to unlock on and try and compact the space. So if we're going to be really effective within a high press, we've got to start considering around what other players we have to try and think about what they need. So if we've got centre halves who maybe not very mobile, not very good on the turn, then we might be depending on what level you're working at. If it's working at development age, you might want to expose them to try and get them better. If you're working at performance, you might have to start considering how high you set your press, because you might want to isolate your central halves into being vulnerable with balls behind them.
Cool, so that leads us on nicely to a little break that we've got. So continue the discussions. We're going to have 5 minutes, so we'll reconvene at 7:20. Keep them coming. Keep any questions that you've got for Stuart or for Matt, and we'll start to answer them when we come back. So See you all at 7:20. Yeah.
we'll talk around in
Okay, just quickly checking that you've got our webcam back and you've got our audio back. Works on mine. I just want to check it works for all of you. Stunned silence.
I know.
I'm guessing they can hear us. So yeah, we're going to go on to our second objective, which was what does it look like for England and when they come in.
Well, I think
on
before
camp.
that, I think we've just been having a discussion through the break. Just curious, really, around some experiences what Blink's had as a player. So we talked around in the past around player characteristics around the team, around high pressing, and what types of plays you may want to consider or need to consider if you're going to be an effective team with a high press. We talked around the back line of Liverpool, allowing them to be more advanced at the pitch for Salah, Mane and Firmino to go and apply the press with the pace they've got in behind. So we're kind of talking the break, weren't we, around your experiences certainly at Sligo, when you played in the Europa League.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk us through that?
Yeah, so we finished second in the league and we got to the Europa League qualifying round. I think it was the second round that we went into. And we played a team called Volska Poltava from the Ukraine. Just to put a bit of context into it, I think our wage budget for the year was under £1 million. Their wage budget was sort of £7 to £8 million. So it was a big contrast and a big task for us to try and get through that. And very important to the club because obviously it creates huge revenue for the club. So we went away to Volska Poltava in Ukraine, and we set up as a mid block. They had a hell of a lot of the ball. My job was quite easy because all I had to do was show on the centre halves down one side. So I was quite happy with that. All the other guys had to do all the hard work and the ball would just be fired into me and I'd try and get hold of it. But we come away with a 0-0 result, which was fantastic for the size of the club that we were compared to them. They were very disappointed. We had, as much as they had most of the possession of the ball, we probably had the better chances. The return leg was 2 weeks later at the Showgrounds, which is a tiny stadium, probably get 5,000-6,000 in it max. And the manager's sort of message to us was, right, let's take it to them here. They're on our patch, let's go and sort of take it to them. And we're going to go for him, high press, go and win the ball back and create a cup atmosphere, obviously. We tried to do that, whether they went through the gears and went from second to third, and it didn't work, whereas the mid-block sort of worked. So the high press for us didn't work in that game. We ended up losing 2 or 3-0, I think. Against some very good players, some Ukrainian internationals were in that team. And you always look back and think, what if we did the mid-block rather than the high press? Would we have still been in the game? Were we physically capable of doing that? Did we have the triggers right as a team? Obviously, as a coaching perspective, as a team, did we sort of go at the right times and did we press together as a team? We obviously didn't because they passed it around us like we weren't there, and they were a very good team on the day. So that was one of my experiences of trying to press high and it not quite working for us.
It's really interesting. So you've touched upon loads of interesting kind of thoughts there around the tech, but also the psych, social and the physical. So how all the corners blend together to try and allow that to be effective is really important. So the mid block being really key and work for you because it was a way of playing that suited your players, and the high press maybe something what you struggle with because obviously the wage budget suggests that they've got a high caliber of player in that moment. So thank you for sharing that, and just a good insight in many different ways of trying to set your team up to try and win the ball back.
Just a good question coming in from the team about, did you play with a high press at any point in that season before, or is it something that was new to you?
It wasn't new because it never is new, is it? You're always working on it, but the calibre of player that you're up against is a lot higher than what it was within the League of Ireland. That's no disrespect to players there. I played in it for 2.5 years, but like I say, the wage budget was 7 to 8 million. So we do what we were doing, but when you come up against better players, that can, it dictates a lot.
So you're just going to take it into what the England teams look like? is we've got some nice graphics that try to visualize what we're going to talk about. So the first one will be we're trying to stop them starting.
Yeah, so we've tried to got these kind of illustrated kind of templates where we try and capture all the information on kind of one page. And we've started to try and introduce language which is simple, rememberable, and trying to get graphics which really kind of stimulate thought, but also is nice and clear. So if we're going to try and encourage our players to play in any style of play, whether it's defensive or in possession, then the clearer it can be within the language we use and the kind of things we get to think about is essential. So we've got the first one, stop them starting. So it's certainly an interesting time now with the new ruling. So whether you can actually stop a team from starting, I suppose that'll come down to the individual who's on the ball. So the first pass is available now, and the 18 yards available to the defender, depending on how far he drops down inside the box, will determine on how good that player is under pressure. And teams may want to sink down the inside or down the side of the box to try and invite the pressure on, to try and open gaps within central areas, to try and play through and break lines. So it's an interesting concept now where you might not be able to stop them initially starting, but you can certainly set up in a way where you can try and certainly invite the first pass and get you into a position where you can maybe close down. I think if you're going to commit players high up to try and sort of be starting high, then if your back line's up as well, then you've got to certainly start thinking about anticipating the long ball. So if you think about Edison striking a dead ball or even a moving ball, very accurate, very precise in what he does with great technique and speed. So if we're really high, then that one pass can certainly get probably onto the edge of our 18-yard line. So, and he's done that in the past with, I think it was the Charity Shield, was it, when the Aguero got through off one long ball right down the middle. So we've got to be mindful about who the opposition are and how do we start to think about defending against them. So nice simple graphic there around, can we stop them starting? Can we try and force a long ball? But that'll come down to the play profile around, can we get centre halves who can go and compete and win the first contact?
Yeah, and obviously we'll share these out as a handout, so you've got them as a resource. Mark's made a good point about making angled runs and setting traps. So that brings us on to the next one. So setting traps and how you force the opposition into areas that you want them to go. Yeah,
and I think it's setting traps. How you kind of frame it up, certainly for the younger players, is really interesting. So as it goes through the pathway, the language used and the terminology used to try and set these traps, they can come up with some wonderful ideas at foundation phase. I think when you start moving through the pathway, YDP, PDP, it's just identifying really the one who you want to get on the ball. So say, for example, you've got a right-footed centre-half playing on the left-hand side, and that might be the one you identify who you want the ball to have. So that might then inform you how to go and set the press and, where you're going to invite the next pass. So we've got a saying through the DNA around not through. So we don't want the ball to come through us. We make it nice, compact. We try and show into the outside lanes. So we class the lanes as being 1 to 5, using the pitch kind of diagram with the 18-yard line, 6-yard line, central zone, etc. So can we invite initially the ball into lane 2? And we might allow the ball then to go in lane 1 and then use the line as an extra defender to try and squeeze. But when we invite the first pass, can we all then go with an intensity to try and force that kind of rushed pass to try and pick maybe the second or third press to try and win the ball back? But again, if we are pressing and we've got a high line, then we've got to think about the space we might be affording the opposition in behind us. So certainly connecting the goalkeeper into that information to make sure he manages the space between the back line and the goal. Any thoughts, Blink?
I think when we say setting a trap, it's important to think you might not win it on the first one. You might be looking to win it on the second or the third pass. So it's important that we talk about it fully with being in 3 lanes and being compact. So if the wide player is going to press or the striker is going to press, like I spoke about myself, sending one way, I know I'm not going to win the ball, but it's everybody else off that. And the pass might go to the right full-back there in that graphic. And he might try and come inside to a midfielder, but the midfielder's also got to cover and also so he's got to do a job and half, we call it. where he's got to cover the ball into a striker, but also be aware that if he passes that now, I'm going to jump on. So it might be a sideways pass.
So Jeff's come up with a good question. What about if the opposition tried to beat the high press by going initially long, which is a great point. So again, they'll take the spaces what are afforded to you. So if you've got the capability from the in-possession team to go and play longer, more advanced passes, then we can't put pressure on the ball initially. So we do have to drop, and we have to give up the space, and we have to try and invite that first pass. So again, it's recognising who you're playing against and who's in your team. So if they've certainly done that once and they've got success, then the red mark will be out and around recognising they're not going to do it again. So how to maybe drop, how to become compact as a team, and how to maybe think, well, go on then, you can have the ball in front of us because you've got to try and play through the block before you can try and get success. So it's just identifying where, as a defensive team, I'm happy for the opposition to have it. That might come in within our system. So where's our strengths and weaknesses? Might come through their system. They might be better than us. So if they're going to be better than us, we might actually come off them slightly to make sure they don't go and play straight in behind, which is the quickest route to go. But we've also got to be mindful of the fact that if they are a team who like to dictate possession, then we might want to start occupying the number 4 so they don't try and switch the point of attack. So I'd be tending to try and operate to show the ball into wide areas so everyone knows exactly where the ball's going to go, which might not be great to try and win the ball back in transition, but it's certainly stopping the problem what the opposition might cause, and using the line and the lack of space is like kind of extra defender. I think also one thing to consider around the visuals, which are great, is that they tend to start off just from the goalkeeper. But actually, there's no reason why it can't start off the press from open play or even from a throw. So how you kind of incorporate that within your practice design to try and think about how you communicate this to your players to try and teach them is really key.
Okay, and that brings us on to the next point about actually from a transition. So we spoke about counter pressing and linking that to Liverpool with that 5-second fury of get after the ball, and Man City using a short passing game to be closer to the ball if they give it away.
Yeah, I think it's certainly something not new for one. It's been around with the game a long, long time. I think that obviously certain individuals who come into the game have certainly put more of a focus on that and brought it back to life, which has been great. And this is the kind of when we go back to the graphic around the most successful teams, this is probably one of the reasons why that they dominate possession, so they get opportunity to rest in possession because the opposition is maybe setting a deeper block and allowing the ball to be recycled in front of their block. So when they do decide to then go and try and penetrate and break their back line down, and they maybe do lose the ball, they've got the energy to go and physically go and repeat the high intensity actions. But because of their organisation whilst in possession of the ball, it means they've got enough players in and around that area so they can try and apply pressure to the ball to try and get it back. Now again, this is probably more can we win it back immediately? Great, we can go and kind of counter and try and get an opportunity at goal. Or it might be nearest man on losing the ball just tries to put some kind of pressure on the ball to get the opponent's head down, so we can't go and complete a safe pass and secure the first, second or third one, which gives them secure possession and potentially puts us in a position where we're unorganised and puts us into problems.
And there's an interesting bit about anticipating regains. So like the England teams was talk about a +1 security in terms of having someone in front to stop that transition against them. So you've got that ability to go after the ball because you already know behind the ball's sorted. Yeah,
and I think the counter press certainly indicates that you're in possession of the ball initially. Yeah. So we go back to the really important thing. I'm really this is my bias around teams organising whilst in possession. So what are your defending unit doing to try and make sure that they're anticipating the transition? because it's utopia again to think that when we're attacking we're going to score every single time. We've got to anticipate when we might lose possession of the ball to try and give us the best opportunity to bring in the block and secure him behind to try and win it back to go and get second, third phase where most goals are probably scored from. So the +1, +2, equals, minus, whatever it might be, is all dependent on where you fit along the kind of performance development pathway. For example, if I'm working development and I want to try and expose my players at getting better at defending, then why would I put +1? Because I'm actually helping them out too much in the defensive mindset. So if I go equal and the ball does get played in a 1v1 situation, or is it because you've got a goalkeeper to help him out as well, so it's potentially still 2v1. But we're asking certain questions of certain individuals to try and stretch their learning. But coming from a performance background where I spent a few years in, then I'm thinking definitely having +1 security because it's hard, isn't it, to try and think about conceding goals. It's you start from a solid base and then building yourself back into the game. But again, it comes down to personal.
I know you spoke about trying to create 1v1s all over the pitch earlier, Matt, and linking that obviously through the development pathway.
I think for me, it's kind of coaching the coaches as well, and what are you trying to get out of it? So is it a results-based or is it a development-based? And it's always a tough task to try and understand it's the long-term development of each individual player. What are the needs of the player, not what are the needs of the coach? So that's why we do what we do, is because we want to challenge them. There are times where they will need a little bit of protection and the confidence building. That's just part and parcel of the development pathway of any player. But it's just the understanding from the coach that this player needs this at this time. He may fail, he may lose games, but the long-term objective is to hopefully try and make the player better at defending 1v1.
I think it's a point around, certainly counter-press around defensive organisation behind the ball. I think it's something what coaches need to consider more, because they tend to get involved with the game and start to follow the ball. They don't actually take their eyes off the ball to actually look what's happening away from the ball. So they can start to give the players really good information around actually, what should you be doing now? So what now to try and get them into the right position? So it's something we've got to really think about when we are coaching, to start looking away from the ball to see what's happening within the game.
It's the what if, isn't it? It's the what if. So I know my attackers are attacking, but they're probably going to give it away. So if he gives it away there, what position are we in to try and hopefully regain the ball back for those attackers to go and hopefully get us a goal?
Okay, so we've got a nice graphic here that just starts to bring to life obviously some of the concepts you've spoken about. So it's England against Bulgaria earlier in this campaign. So it's from a restart and goal kick.
It's really interesting. It's the opposition stretching, occupying the back line to try and make the pitch big. Fullbacks high wide, sinking down this corner of the box, which makes it really difficult for the opposition, England in this instance, to try and defend the spaces. And we talked around before about the three being flattened off to try and cover more space. They've won it back really cleanly. We've got a good reward for the defensive action.
So yeah, I guess if you zoom into these 1v1s happening all over the pitch, it's a real key insight in terms of the knock-on effect of what happens if one goes and doesn't get it right. What happens?
Yeah, it'd be really interesting if their midfield actually dropped down to try and create space over the press. Which will certainly ask a question then of the England six, whether they still maintain that position, whether they drop off and invite even further that first pass.
Yeah. And it's not always like that perfect utopia picture where you win it, pinch it, and go and score. So yeah, we've got a good 20 minutes to bring everything we've discussed tonight into how we go about it and improve our players on the grass?
Yeah, I think there's some really good questions coming through and some really good discussion around, how do we kind of certainly encourage and kind of develop this kind of concept around high press. Certainly for the foundation phase, I think it is pretty easy because the pitches aren't that big. So when you think about attaching decision making to pressing, I think the players want to get the ball back. And how you bring that to life within small-sided games is really kind of key. But I think it's quite simple. So we'll hopefully come on to how you can bring it to life within foundation phase players, how you can reward them for the things you value the most. But I think it's down to recognising who you're working with as individuals. So what can they do and what do you want them to do in the future, depending on what age they're working through the pathway. But I think it's just recognising, certainly when you get older, is recognising what the opposition are trying to do and how then you might set up against them depending on what capabilities the individuals have. So, for example, if we are going to try and stop them starting, but we're playing, for example, against Edison, then that might be the wrong thing to do, depending on the players we've got available. So maybe that we've got to drop deeper to invite the first 1, 2, 3 passes before we can start maybe putting some pressure on the ball, either inside, outside, whatever the strategy may be. But it's certainly one thing to be clear upon. Higher up the pathway, you just need to have a clear way of thinking about how to defend.
And I guess that comes back to Jeff's question about why. So start with the why, and that'll impact on your strategy of how you go about it. So this was our brief really. So small numbers, small areas. Okay, and this brings it back onto the point about actually what are the requirements of the players to be able to do what you're asking of them.
Yeah, I think so. From my observations when supporting some coaches, certainly within even academies, you tend to get quite a lot of players on one pitch, and sometimes the spaces available aren't really kind of really real for their decision making. So can I press? Yes, because I'm really close to the ball. So how we kind of use practice design to make small areas bigger with the movements of the halfway line to try and create space on one side of the pitch and not the other is kind of key. But just recognising that high press is physically demanding. So how often does it happen within the game? And how do we then think about how we can construct practices where we don't try and get the players to do a lot more of and actually reduce the actual quality of? So we've got to be really mindful around, we want high intensity accelerations, decelerations, but we can't keep thinking about too much repetition because the quality of the work and the decision making attached will get reduced, and that won't be any good for learning or for clarity of message.
Nice, we've got a few practices to run through and discuss and debate.
Okay, good. So this is a practice really what came off the UEFA A today. So Jimmy Gilligan worked with a group of learners around position specific. So we're just going to take you through some kind of thoughts and considerations around what he designed and what he delivered. So starting from the 11v11 game and then breaking it down. So we were tasked with working with the white team. So 4-3-3. We kind of had 2 down, but then we got the players to think about rotating the positions around. So it might be double pivot, might be single pivot as we went through. And that was just being matched up by a 4-3-3 as well. So goalkeeper, 4-3 and a 3. So that was where we kind of started the planning from. So identifying what shape we wanted to work from. And then all we did then as a group squad practice, we had 4 coaches working on the pitch at the same time. So the illustration to the right-hand side, which has a goalkeeper, the 5, the 6 and the 9, that was a small practice where we were trying to embed some real kind of key detail around the information, what the 9 needed to consider around setting the press. Whilst that practice was going on, we had 2 other coaches working with the rest of the squad around some principles linked with the white team, which were really important when we were back into the game at the end. But going back to the first practice with the 5 and 6, so if you can notice, we've narrowed off the pitch, so we're managing the loading. obviously reducing a little bit of realism because the spaces might be a little bit bigger. But we've quartered that kind of area of the pitch off. So when the ball goes into one of the quarters, the ball then can't be transitioned back into the other quarters, so therefore making 2v1. So if, for example, the ball went to the 5, the goalkeeper in the 5 will play with the 9 trying to stop them from trying to hit the mannequin. So if you look at the 2 mannequins, one's a red mannequin, so we put a bib on the mannequin, and that was chosen by the 5 and 6 as the mannequin, what they wanted to try and hit in essence, to try and identify that was their number 4. So the game was, if the 5 and 6 can hit the red mannequin or the yellow mannequin, that will be deemed a success. If they hit the yellow mannequin, they would be rewarded with starting with the ball again to get more repetition. If they could hit the red mannequin, that will give them 2 points. The 9 would think about, if the ball went into the 5, around how he approached to try and cut the passing line off the mannequin. So think about how they may look depending on where the 5 receives the ball. Obviously, with being a still ball, it suggests it's a goal kick, so he's got to start on the outside of the box. And then you might start thinking, well, how does he maybe start initially to set the trap? So if you recognise the body shape from the goalkeeper, he may then go and start to stand next to the red mannequin because he maybe appreciates the ball's going to get played to the 5. Once the ball rolls, he's then live to go and apply pressure onto the 5, or to maybe guard the position where the mannequin may be, and that's a 2v1 game. If the 5 or 6 or even the goalkeeper try and play the ball through to the mannequin but miss, a ball then will be played straight into the 9, where the 5 and 6 have to narrow off and defend the 1v2 situation. So more often than not, if we're trying to keep it real to the game, when you're building the attack, it's overloaded because you've got the use of the goalkeeper. When we're attacking, apart from a counter-attacking opportunity, it's usually underloaded. So to try and keep the 9 motivated, to try and make it more game-like, on missing a mannequin, so a poor pass into maybe what will be the 4, or what might be the 8 dropping down, the 9 will then get opportunity to try and shoot at goal, which might then give us opportunity where the 5 and 6 win the ball back to try and get that kind of creating space to recycle for the keeper. So that's kind of that practice in a lot more detail. So think about what it means to you in your environment with your players around the detail what you can try and get out. So cutting off passing lines, angle of approach, speed of approach, body shape to start to dictate where you want the ball to go. Is it inside, outside? Side on, knees bent, moving your feet, etc., etc. On the other side of the pitch, where there'd been a squad practice, the Reds' game was to try and score the main goal. The 2 and the 3 could come outside the box only when the ball was on that side. So if the ball went into the 7, the number 2 could help and try and create an overload, which would try and ask certain questions of the whites defending. But then on transition, the whites then can only go and break into the boxes vacated by the players. So they couldn't go and attack the 3 box. They can only go and attack the middle box and the box vacated by the 2. If you recognise there's a blue line within the diagram, the aim of that is that I want the back line to get across that blue line before they score. So what we're trying to encourage them to think about, is quite rightly mentioned through some of the questions, are we want our team to be connected. So when we are high pressing, the back line are key, because if they don't squeeze up and compact the play, then the opposition might be able to go and pass through the lines. So that was that kind of game. That was our thought process. As we started to embed some detail around what the 9 had, we then started to reduce the numbers on the left-hand side and started to build more detail and more numbers and more complexity to the practice on the right-hand side. So we've got across the red 2 and the red 3, but also the 9, so the white 7 and the white 11. We also included 2 more mannequins in the practice. This will be then to start to consider around what our defensive strategy may be around showing inside or outside. So, for example, the bibs are now placed on the outside players, so the strategy may be to try and show into central areas. We could also put the bibs on the inside with the mannequins to try and get them to think about narrowing off, be compact to stop the balls going through to central areas. So we made the pitch wider, we made the pitch longer. So now the players have got to really think about spaces. So if we make the spaces too small, we start to give the players a wrong rationale reasoning around how easy pressing may be. So if we make the pitch big, they've got to really attach a decision. Can I press? No, too far away. I need to drop, protect the space, invite the players in. So again, they could play either side now, so it wasn't restricted around just playing in one quarter. But now the players had to start thinking about communication, start to think about if the 9 could apply pressure on the ball, what's the supporting angles, distances, what the 7-11 may be, and depending on where the bibs was placed, what their position was like. Because again, if the yellow mannequins are on the outside this time and not on the inside, that if they could play and hit the mannequin, they could recycle back from the keeper. What we also had, so it wasn't just a standing ball, from the dead ball. We also had another coach feeding the ball into the goalkeeper. So if the ball came in from the goalkeeper coach, it may came in as a cross. So the goalkeeper had to go and deal with the ball in the air, and that dictated it was live. So then the 9 could potentially go in the box straight away because the rules of the game in open play, so they can go wherever you like. So lots of things to think about, lots of thoughts to ask the players. So it wasn't a coach demanding things of the players. It was a very Q&A kind of getting information out of the players, because it was away for a session, and within the context of the players we had available, the ex-players would try to draw on their experiences of their playing career around what moments they would be thinking about in that kind of moment. So that was that kind of practice on that side. Again, we made it narrower for one to manage the workload, because bearing in mind they had a 3-hour high pressing session which the candidates took part in. They had a 2-hour practical today, so we just wanted to manage the loading so we could get the quality. But also we wanted to try and put a pressure under the team in possession to try and play and cause us different problems. What we then started to think about within the practice was moving the bibs. So without maybe the 3 white players knowing, we were consistently moving the bibs. So then they had to start recognising, checking the shoulders and scanning around where the bibs were, so they can actually start to think about what strategy of press they were applying to that moment of the game. So on the left-hand side of the diagram now, with the numbers increasing on the right-hand side, they would decrease on the left. So we started to incorporate mini goals as players. And the idea of the game was that to try and keep motivation and realism as much as we could, the Reds would score the main goal as normal. So they was getting lots of opportunities to play in possession and the benefits from that. So we had one coach working with the in possession team to try and cause more realistic problems for our white team. If the Reds could score, that was 1 goal, so we're going towards a big goal. For the white team, they still had to get across the blue line and play into one of the smaller goals, but because there's 3 smaller goals, it's potentially easier. So 3 goals in the white into the mini goals for the white team would equal 1 to try and make it as competitive as we could to try and keep motivation within the practice. So the practice to the right was very detailed. It was very coach kind of outcome driven, and a kind of coach education session. The session on the left hand side was high ball rolling to make sure we had coaches working drive by with the individuals and drip feeding information in as the players would play. And then from that practice there, we spilled it even further, where we started to add a red number 4 and then a white number 10, just to try and kind of make it even more complex around their thinking. So again, we made the pitch slightly longer to try and give more space. But now we started to think about, well, if the ball does go and break the line from the 5 to the 4, how then could we maybe start to get pressure from the front, from the 9, 11, and pressure from behind from the 10, to try and win the ball back and then counter-attack. So again, if they hit the mannequin, they would get 2 points if it's a red mannequin, because the defensive strategy hadn't worked in that moment. If they could hit the yellow mannequin, great, they got to recycle the ball back from the keeper. But if they missed any mannequin at any time, ball were fed into the white team to make it more game-like and give them that opportunity to attack on transition. And hopefully then you get the Reds winning the ball back, and then you get the Whites unorganised. And again, it's just a reduction of the practice on the left-hand side where the scoring was exactly the same. The Red 8 this time was locked into the blue zone. So we wanted to try and create as much realism as we could by not having the Reds overloaded. So we wanted to try and keep them underloaded to try and provide the right challenge for them. The 8 white could put pressure on the Red 8, so he could slide in and around that zone. But then he could also recover back in to help the 4 and to try and provide a bit more support and help for the whites in possession. But in transition, again, they have to try and break out to the goals.
Okay, and just a few questions coming about how we're building up the picture from obviously started with smaller numbers and building it up, and how that looks in foundation phase or grassroots football, and obviously how you vary that for the players that are in front of you at that given moment.
Yeah, I think that, you know, the context of the session was UEFA A. So the UEFA A looking at the big game, the 11v11 game. I suppose the challenge for all of us as coaches is to think about how we kind of adapt practice to try and get the outcomes we want, whichever age and stage we're working with, whether it's in the male or female game. If you start to think about the smaller practices, certainly the first one we showed around the goalkeeper, 2 centre halves and the number 9, that could certainly be relevant for foundation-based players, and you know we get certainly really good returns. You can even mirror that practice on the other side of it, where you've got the white 5 and 6 and a red 9, and if you can play through rather than to a mannequin, you can play through to the opposition side. You've got a small side game to the 5v5. So you kind of think about how you structure your practice to try and get the outcomes you want is really key. But the big thing, what we thought of massive benefit today was, and certainly with like open age learners, it was game-like. So because it was a game, we had motivation. Because it was a game, you had intensity, it was tempo. Once you start getting 2 things together, you start getting the realism. Start to get realism, you start to get realistic pictures where you can start to think about what the individual needs. So that'd be the challenge, really. But if you wanted to start thinking about what foundation phase, going back to the end of the session, we went back into the 11v11 game. So we started with the game, broke it down into little parts, then we finished back with the game to see what the learning had taken place. But if we start to think about how small-sided games may look, if we go on to the next slide, Matt, this is what it might look like. Again, it could be still related to 11v11 game. And again, if you play with your numbers, you can start thinking about how it kind of fits and how it positions itself within whatever age you're working at. But the game is here. So the ball is played from the halfway line. It can be played into the white team or the red team. You can mix it up. You can do whatever you like. The focus is on how the white team go and press and try and win the ball back. So more often than not, the ball's going into the red team initially. So if it went into the red back line or the goalkeeper, then the game started from there. So how the whites then would think about applying the press and try and win the ball back to score. If you think about how the practice is structured, there's a red dotted line which indicates an offside line for the red back line. So they can choose how far they drop and how far they try and squeeze in relation to where the ball is. So again, think about where and how you might incorporate offsides to your players, whatever age you think that's relevant for. So under 11, it starts to come in certainly with grassroots. If you're working at the elite end of the academies, there's no reason if the players understand it at 9, why not introduce it? They might not completely get it, but if you start to introduce these kind of rules and the realism of the game, it starts to certainly affect the actions of the players around the types of movements, the types of decision making with the pass, and how they go and defend. So the offside line and rule is key to effective defending and how we kind of utilise or restrict space. The yellow zone's probably the key one. So the trade-off around the realism around the yellow zone is that them 4 players are locked in that area. So the game would be if I play the ball into the red team, so the red 3, for example, gets the ball, they'll try and play and combine to try and play the ball into the 4 or 8. If it goes into the 4 or 8, the constraint on the practice is that ball has to go back into the other half, to the back 4, before it can then go back into that zone and the game becomes free. That does a couple of things. It invites the ball into that zone where they're restricted with space. So how do we then prepare the 4 and 8 wide to try and go and get tight, to restrict space? So if the 8 receives the ball, how tight does the 8 get? Where does he get tight? How does he get tight? And how can he delay that forward movement? Does the 4 stay tight to the 4? Or does he start to think about covering round and doing a job and a half in preparation for what might come next? But more important, if the ball goes into the 8 and the 8 is holding the player up to kind of delay and kind of disrupt his touch, how then the 7 or 10 can maybe go and turn and squeeze the play from the front to try and win the ball back. So double mark. So how can we contract the space to try and force that error, to try and get the ball back, to try and transition on the counter? What's interesting then is the game progresses is that you can start putting rewards on your kind of defending team. So if they can win the ball back, say, for example, in 5 passes or less, whether they score or are unsuccessful in possession, you might then start with the ball with them and actually give them the ball back as a reward for their hard work and intention of trying to win the ball back in the first instance. So it's all about mentality. Have they got the attitude to go and initiate the press? You might also then consider, well, if they score, you might go and reward them with the ball again. But then you've got to think about, well, if we keep rewarding them for their actions, we might be reducing opportunities for them to go and press more. So it's a balance about how you place value and what you want to try and get more of. As the practice goes and progresses, you might start even considering, well, what's the implications if I allow my red 4 or 8 to start dropping into the opponent's half? So as soon as we encourage this on day 1 of the A license, the question from the white 4 and 8 was, can we go with them? Well, yes, you can, but what's the problem? And they identify, well, we'll leave in space. So as long as they identify that through the constraint we've applied in the practice and how we kind of take these constraints off to allow more freedom with the actions, it will certainly give more things for the players to think about. So initially, by being locked in, we're reducing the space, we're reducing the time, we're giving possibly opportunities for winning the ball back more. And then we're also thinking about, well, if we start to free this up even further, allowing the 4 and 8 to start to move into spaces to create overloads to build the attack, we can allow momentum for them to come at us if we've got space. But if we drop our 4 in to go tight, then we might be affording spaces behind. So how do we anticipate that longer pass? So that was the kind of thought process around a small side game. Now, this was at the back end of a 2-hour session. So trying to get players to physically go and exert and to try and put the press on was quite demanding late on because they worked really hard. So then we asked the question about, well, come on then, what would you do in your environment to try and encourage your players to go and press the ball higher up? Because they tended to sit off where the offside line were, in more of a kind of, if you would, mid-block. They said, well, if we win the ball back past the offside line, we might get more points if we go and score. So that changed their behaviour straight away. So if they could win the ball back as high as they could past the red line, then they could get 3 goals. So straight away, think about how your players might react to that. So even in the simplest sense, if you had a small-sided game and you put thirds in the practice, and you put 3 points to win the ball in the final third, closest to the opposition's goal, 2 points in the middle third, which may be they're beating the first press, but it's okay. We've got security behind the ball and in the mid-block, and we won the ball back, we get 2 points. So actually, a goal's a goal, and if we win it back in front of our own goal, but then start to progress up the pitch and control possession and score, then we still should get value for that, which is 1 point. And then if you think about, well, if we're going to put that on the other side to try and encourage the opposition to maybe play out from the back, the other team might have a different scoring system. So if they're going to get success at building the attack, they might have, well, if we can build it from our defensive third and score, so they play through the third to get 3 points, But if they go and win it back in the middle third and only build from them, they get 2. But then if they go and win it back in the final third, because we want to focus on the building the attack, they may only get 1. So how you maybe place value on the game to try and get the players to think about why you're doing what you're doing can be introduced at the foundation phase. And also you can do that with open age players to try and give them that incentive.
I'm just going to throw it out to Matt that Dan's put a good comment about the foundation phase in terms of you've got to get at least, you can only keep 1 player back in your own half to score, otherwise your goal doesn't count. So trying to get that mindset into get up the pitch and squeeze the space and close them distances.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't need to be given lots of tactical detail to the foundation phase players. It's the constraints you put on your games to allow that to come out. So as Stu said, just doing the 3 zones and high scoring and low scoring in certain areas related to the theme that you're trying to get out and get your outcomes out. That's perfect. So Dan's come up with a great idea there, and the more of those sort of ideas that we have and think about during the practices to try and adapt, because we have to be adaptable to what we're seeing within the sessions, is great.
I think when you look at certainly the younger end, if you've only got limited space, you might just have a halfway line. If you win the ball in the opposing half, you get more points, but you get even greater points if once you've scored, your back defenders are across the halfway line. So we're recognising that if that is important for a high press, around being connected and compact with the back unit, then we might place value on that as well. But we're not taking away the fact that if they do score and they've worked the high press, but the back line's disconnected, they still get value as well. So how you pitch the value of the points afforded to the team will determine on how you shape their kind of certainly engagement, but also what they do in terms of player behaviours.
Cool, so that was our brief.
Yeah, I feel like I've talked loads, so apologies for that. Hopefully you found it insightful. Really appreciate your interactions from the questions you've kind of helped us with, because some of the questions you've kind of posed certainly ignite some thought, some information, some topics for discussion. So really appreciate your interaction.
Yeah, I'll follow up. Obviously, you get 2 hours worth of CPD for your attendance tonight. I'll share the handout with you now, so it should come up on the handout page. It should have pinged up on your screen, so you're able to download that now. So that'll be a PDF of the slides we've gone through, so you can add some detail and obviously refer back to them. And I'd just like to place on record my thanks for Matt coming in tonight, and obviously Stu for his expertise across the board.
No, I think it's just, finishing kind of word of it. Just be clear about what it is you want the players to be good at, and then think about how you can communicate it in the most simplest way possible, so you can have clarity in message. Some absolutely fantastic work going on throughout the whole kind of football family. So it just goes to show the interest and kind of the curiosity around you guys trying to make yourself better, and the kind of way you've kind of shared your kind of thoughts through the questions. Apologies that we couldn't answer everything. They were coming that fast that we couldn't read a lot of them. So many thanks for that, and all the very best with developing young or old footballers, male or female, in the future.
Yeah, and just a bit of logistics for me. Obviously, we're trying new software, so hopefully the experience as a learner on the webinar tonight has been better, a bit more slicker. So we'd appreciate any feedback for that, and obviously inform our practice moving forward to get even better. Just a lot of thanks paid to you guys that are just flying in.
No, thank you, Max. If the technology had gone down, we've been struggling.
So I hope to catch you on future webinars, and I'll leave you to discuss things to yourselves.
Nice evening. Thank you.
Thank you.